Imagine you are looking at the Earth from space. There's 1900. You can see. If you could map religion the way you map weather systems, a great concentration of Christianity in one part of the globe, dense, dominant, seemingly permanent, Europe, the British Isles, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Christianity is so thoroughly embedded in European civilization that it is almost inseparable from it. 95% of Europeans call themselves Christian. The continent that produced the Holy Roman Empire, the Gothic cathedrals, the Reformation, the great missionary societies, the continent that sent Christianity to the rest of the world, is overwhelmingly, comprehensively, almost entirely Christian. Now come back to the present. The same map, the same planet. 125 years later, the European concentration has faded, not disappeared, but faded dramatically. The cathedrals are still there, the staples are still there, but the people inside them have left. And something else has happened, something nobody in 1900 predicted, something that the most sophisticated demographers of religion did not fully anticipate even 50 years ago. The light have come on somewhere else, Africa, Asia, Latin America. In 2025, the Global South is home to 69% of all Christians in the world, projected to reach 78% by 2050. The map of Christianity has been redrawn. This episode is about what that map looks like now and what it means. Welcome back to this channel. We have been walking through the whole history of the church, from the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, through Athanasius and Augustine, and the African Church Fathers, through the Great Schism and Martin Luther, and the return of Christianity to sub-Saharan Africa. Today, we arrive at the present moment. We are going to look at the global church in 2025 and 2026, with real numbers, honest analysis, and the questions that the data raises but does not answer. This is where the history we have traced arrives. Let us see what it looks like. Let us start with one number because it contains the whole story. In 1900, 70% of the world's Christians lived in Europe. Today, that figure is just 22%. 70% to 22 in 125 years. This is not a trend. This is a transformation. And the inverse of that transformation is equally striking. Almost as many Christians live in Africa, 750 million, as in Europe, Russia, and North America combined, 823 million. Africa alone, with 750 million Christians, nearly matches the entire combined Christian population of Europe, Russia, and North America. Africa became the continent with the most Christians in 2018, passing Latin America, which has itself passed Europe in 2014. Think about the sequence. Europe was the center of Christianity for over a millennium. Latin America passed it in 2014. Africa passed Latin America 4 years later. The center of gravity has been moving, not slowly, not gradually, but in a rapid accelerating shift that has already completed its most dramatic phase. Christianity in Africa is growing at an outstanding 2.5% per year. In the fastest growing region, Middle Africa, the Congo Basin, it is growing at 3.16% per year. By 2050, Africa will be home to more than 1.2 billion Christians. Almost 600 million will live in Asia. These are not projections from optimistic missionary societies. These are peer-reviewed demographic data from the Center for Study of Global Christians at Gordon Cowell Theological Seminary, one of the most rigorous research bodies tracking world religion. The map has been redrawn. Now let us look at each region and understand what is actually happening. In 1900, nearly 95% of European population profess some form of Christianity. In 2025, the continent is 74.5% of Christian. 74% still sounds like a majority. That number conceals more than it reveals. Because the question in Europe is not how many people identify as Christian, it is how many of those people actually practice the faith. And on that measure, the picture is far more stark. In France, a nation that aggressively guards its secularism, Christianity is becoming more symbolic than spiritual. In Italy, civil weddings outnumber Catholic ones for the first time in 2018. In Spain, civil ceremonies made up 80% of all weddings by 2018. The pattern is the same across the continent. The grandparents go to church, the parents go at Christmas and Easter. The children do not go at all, and they describe themselves as spiritual but not religious when anyone asks. The number of European Christians fell by around 17 million in the past 5 years. 17 million in 5 years. The equivalent of losing a country the size of the Netherlands, worth of Christians in half a decade. Christianity in Europe declined at 0.54% per year between 2020 and 2025. The decline is not uniform. Eastern Europe, Poland, Hungary, Romania remain significantly more religious than Western Europe. The Orthodox churches of Russia and the Balkans retain deeper popular roots than the Catholic and Protestant churches of the West. But the overall trajectory is consistent and well established. What caused it? The explanations are multiple and contested. The Enlightenment's long-term erosion of religious authority, the moral failures of institutional churches, the abuse scandals that devastated Catholic credibility across Ireland, Germany, France, and beyond, the prosperity of the post-war decades that made people feel they did not need what the church offered, the rise of individualism that makes submission to a tradition feel like a loss of self. None of this explanation is complete on its own. All of them are part of the picture. What is clear is that Europe, which sent missionaries to every corner of the earth in the 19th century, is now one of the most secular regions on the planet. By 2060, not a single European country will be among the top 10 nations with the largest Christian population. The continent that built the cathedrals is leaving them. North America's story is more complicated, and in the most recent data, genuinely surprising. North America was 97.1% Christians in 1900 and fell to 70.9% by 2025. The decline is real and well documented. Christianity in North America declined at minus 0.14% per year between 2020 and 2025, and the number of North American Christians dropped by almost 2 million in the past 5 years. For decades, the story seemed simple. America was following European path towards a post-Christian society. Churches emptying, the nuns, those identifying with no religion, rising year on year, traditional belief systems collapsing, no end in sight. Then something unexpected happened in the most recent data. The share of Americans identifying as atheists, agnostic, or nothing in particular fell from 36.2% in 2022 to 35.6% in 2023, 34.1% in 2024, and 31.8% in 2025. The nuns are declining, not slightly, meaningfully, across multiple independent surveys. Banner's 2025 State of the Church data show weekly Bible reading among adults rising to 42%, up 12 points from a 15-year low in 2024. Among Gen Z specifically, Bible reading rose from 30% to 49% in a single year. That last number deserves to be said again. Among Gen Z Americans, the generation that was supposed to be the most secular in US history, weekly Bible engagement nearly doubled in 12 months. The explanation is not fully clear yet. Some researchers point to the exhaustion of secular progressivism promises. Materialism does not answer the questions human beings actually ask. It cannot tell a young man why he exists, why he should marry, have children, tell the truth, or die for something greater than himself. Other point to cultural counter-movements, among young men in particular, who are returning to traditional structures in significant numbers. What can be said with confidence is that the old story, America inevitably following Europe towards secularization, is no longer the only story being told by the data. The America chapter is not closed. While the West debates the direction of its trend lines, Africa and Asia are not debating, they are growing. We covered the African story in detail in our previous episode. The number bears repeating in this context. Africa is growing at 2.59% per year, the fastest of any continent. In Middle Africa, the growth rate is 3.16% per year. By 2050, Africa will be home to more than 1.2 billion Christians. But Asia is a story that often gets overlooked. Christianity in Asia grew at an average of 1.60 per year between 2020 and 2025. Consider what is contained in that number. Asia is home to the world's two most populous nations, China and India, both of which have historically been resistant to Christianity. And yet, the growth rate is 1.60 annually and accelerating. China's house church movement, largely underground, officially suppressed, and therefore difficult to count precisely, is estimated to number in the tens of millions. The Chinese Communist Party has been systematically restricting religious practice, and yet the church there continues to grow. The history of Christianity in China is a study in how suppression and growth coexist in ways that defy simple political analysis. South Korea has become one of the most Christian nations in Asia, and one of the world's leading missionary-sending countries. The story of Korean Christianity, with its intensity of prayer and evangelistic commitment, is one of the most remarkable in modern church history. Nigeria and Brazil have become global engines for Protestant expansion. Nigeria, which we have covered in this series through the story of Samuel Ajayi Crowther, now has some of the largest individual church congregations on earth. The Redeemed Christian Church of God, headquartered in Lagos, holds a monthly service on a highway campsite that regularly draws hundreds of thousands of worshippers. From fewer than 1 million Pentecostal and charismatic adherents in 1900, this movement is projected to exceed 1 billion by 2050. That trajectory, 1 million to 1 billion, in 150 years, is arguably the most dramatic expansion of a single religious movement in recorded history. Here is where the story gets complicated. Because the shift in Christianity's center of gravity is not just demographic, it is theological. And the theological tensions that come with it are real, significant, and not yet resolved. Consider one example. The Anglican Communion, the global family of churches that traces its roots to the Church of England, has been in a state of deep internal crisis for over 2 decades. The present issue has been human sexuality and the blessing of same-sex unions. The Western churches, particularly the Episcopal Church in the United States and the Church of England, have moved towards affirming positions. The African Anglican churches, which now constitute the majority of the global communion members, have firmly rejected those positions on the basis of scripture and African cultural values. The result has been a fracture within Anglicanism that mirrors, in some ways, the tensions of the Great Schism of 1054. A global church that shares the same liturgy and the same history is discovering that it does not share the same conclusion on questions it considers fundamental. This is not a uniquely Anglican problem. It is a symptom of a deeper structural reality. The most defining trend in 21st century Christianity is the decisive shift of its center of gravity towards the global south, with African Asia emerging as the new highlands of Christian growth and vitality. And global South Church, in most of its major expressions, hold more conservative theological positions on ethics and doctrine than the Western churches that sent its missionaries in the 19th century. The missionaries who went to Africa came with the gospel. Africa received the gospel and read it. And in many cases, he read it differently, or more precisely, than those who brought it. The question of who gets to interpret Christianity in a global church is not a question that has a clean answer, but it's one that will define the next 50 years of the faith. For 500 years, the answer to the question who defines Christianity was in practice Western institutions, Rome, Canterbury, Geneva, the great theological seminaries of Germany and Scotland, and the United States, the establishing houses of London and New York. That is no longer the unambiguous answer. When the majority of Christians on earth live in Africa and Asia, the question of whose theological frameworks, whose cultural assumptions, whose reading of scripture should govern the global church becomes genuinely open. Anglicanism illustrates the demographic transition clearly. While the Church of England has historically been the center of the communion, the global center has moved to sub-Saharan Africa. The Archbishop of Canterbury leads a communion where his own church is a shrinking minority of the global membership. The same tension plays out in Catholicism. The most rapid Catholic growth is currently occurring in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. The College of Cardinals, the body that elects the Pope, has become significantly more diverse in recent decades. The question of whether a future Pope might come from Africa or Asia is no longer hypothetical, it's a matter of when. And in global evangelicalism and Pentecostalism, which have no single institutional center, the question is even more open. The theological energy, the missiological creativity, The sheer vitality of the movement is located in Lagos and Nairobi and Seoul and Sao Paulo, not in London or Nashville. This is not a problem to be solved, it is a reality to be navigated. The church was built by Tertullian in Carthage, systematized by Augustine in Hippo, defended by Athanasius in Alexandria, has become genuinely irreversibly global. And genuinely global means genuinely diverse. The question is whether the traditions that emerge from that history can hold together across that diversity, or whether the 21st century will produce its own version of 1054. Before we close, two numbers from the 2025 global data that are not comfortable to report, but that honest engagement with the church's present reality requires. The first is martyrdom. In 1917, more than 3.7 million Christians were killed over a 10-year window. That number fell to 1.6 million by 2000, and 900,000 by 2020. But it has plateaued around 900,000 and is projected to go to 1 million by 2050. 900,000 Christians killed for their faith every decade. Not in the ancient world, now in Nigeria, in North Korea, in parts of India and the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa. The church that is growing fastest is also the church that is dying most violently. The second is financial crime. Giving to Christian causes reached almost $1.4 billion in 2025. But ecclesiastical crime, money stolen from churches, amounted to $92 billion in 2025 and is expected to reach almost $400 billion by 2050. $92 billion stolen from churches annually, by church leaders, by administrators, by the people entrusted with the resources of the people of God. This number should disturb anyone who takes the church seriously. They are not arguments against the church's missions or against the faith. The argument for accountability, for transparency, for the kind of institutional integrity that the church has always preached and has always struggled to embody consistently. The church is not only its best moment. The history we have traced in this series makes that clear. It is also its worst ones. Honest engagement with both is not a threat to faith, it's a condition of mature faith. We have walked a long road in this series, from a council in 325 AD, where a young Egyptian deacon helped define what Christians believe about Jesus, through the 5 exiles of Athanasius and the garden in Milan, where Augustine wept and was found, through the African fathers who built Christian theology and the Arab conquest that nearly erased them, through the split of 1054, through the split of 1054 and the Yama of 1517, and the slave ship that carried Samuel Ajari Karada and released the bishop. And now here, in 2025 and 2026, with 2.6 billion Christians on earth, the largest religious community in human history, and the majority of them living not in the West but in the global South. Christianity slightly outpaced the global rate of population growth, 0.98% versus 0.88%, making it a growing, not shrinking, global religion despite its decline in its historical Western Heartlands. If you are a Christian watching this from Nigeria, or Ghana, or Kenya, or South Africa, you are not on the periphery of the Christian world, you are at its center. The theological traditions you have inherited, the worship you practice, the faith you carry, it is not a Western import that has come a long way from home. It is a homecoming. The faith that was born in the Middle East, that was shaped in Alexandria and Carthage and Hippo, that survived conquest and exile and schism and reformation, has come back to the continent that gave it 3 of its greatest minds. And it is growing, not slowly, not cautiously, at 2.59% per year. The map has been redrawn, and if you are on the continent where the lights are coming on, you are living inside one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of the faith. This episode closes the first arc of the series. We have traced the church from Nicaea to the 4th century, from a small disputed council to a global community of 2.6 billion people, on every continent on earth. Next, we go back into the middle of the story, because there's a chapter we have not yet opened. The Crusades, one of the most misunderstood, most weaponized, most emotionally charged episode in the history of Christianity. What actually happened? Who launched them? What was done in the name of Christ? And how the legacy shaped Muslim-Christian relations to this day. No sanitizing, no simplifying, just the history, as honestly as we can tell it. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Thank you.